introduce all of our panelists today. So everyone knows Riggs Lokka. So here at Emeritus, we have Jordan Lonborg from Coastal Vineyard Care, and he is the manager of organic and regenerative and biodynamic viticulture. And then we have Guillaume Eicholz, who is the vineyard director at Dominus Winery, and then Michael Frey, who is the head of operations at Mariah. So I just want to start off with going down and the row and saying, you know, how long you've been dry farming, where your vineyard's located, acreage, things like that. So I think I'm going to skip Riggs because he's already spoken. So we'll go down to Jordan, and maybe Jordan, you can just talk about your experience at Chavez dry farming, right? And what that operation looked like.
Yeah. I hate mics. Do I have to?
Yes, you have to.
Hello. Yeah, sorry for the confusion there. I was working at Talbot's Creek as their vineyard manager up until about February, and took a new position with the Coastal Vineyard Care and Associates, which is a vineyard management company based out of Southern California. But I did manage the vineyard at Talbot's Creek for 9 years. It's a 240-acre estate. It's planted to about 140 at this point, split down the middle, dry farm to irrigated vineyards. And the original plantings, significant dry farm planting, was around 2005, 2006. And then Paso Robles in general. I mean, I think the first dry farm vines probably would be the Pacenti Vineyard, which is still in place. That was planted back in the 1920s. The Duceys followed behind them, and they're still dry farming down there as well. The west side of Paso is very conducive to dry farming as a whole. We have heavy clay soils, calcareous formation. We're averaging around 25 inches a year rainfall, and very similar diurnal changes there as well. 30 to 40 degrees. Tablas is located, 10 miles from the ocean as a crow flies. All Rhone varietals, typically planted on 1103 Paulson. And we did just complete, it was about a 35 to 40 acre planting of dry farm vines, which was an incredible journey over 8 years. And I think it's hands down the largest single planting of dry farm vines in Paso Robles. So that was a learning experience for everybody involved on many levels, very steep hillsides, rocky ground. There were a lot of challenges, made a ton of mistakes, learned a lot of lessons. What is steep? My gosh, Austin, you got a percentage on that? 12%, 15% probably on the toughest spots, Steep enough to where we had a couple harvests ago, a wide track crawler get up on one side. So, yeah, it's treacherous ground, but really conducive to dry farming. I mean, that calcareous formation really assists with like salinity and flavor structure of wines. I think there is a reflective nature as far as sunlight is concerned as well. You get this real chalky white soil, so you have this really nice light reflection. And the training is all mainly on a vertical cordon, is what we call it down there. So not much gobelet in the vineyard. Everything is trained up a T-post, and we try and position the chutes in like a spiral staircase fashion.
Cordon's high enough for the sheep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the sheep are only in the vineyard during dormant periods, but they do play a role when we can get into those spots. Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating site on many levels. To Riggs's points earlier in the field, those drought seasons that we had definitely in that like 20 and 21 year, our trellised irrigated portions of the vineyard were probably down by 50% in yield, where our dry farm sections of that property were hardly phased. So, you know, a lot of the Grenaches were farming to 2.5 to 3 tons an acre, and yeah, it's a special spot. There are a handful of other dry farmers in the area, you know, that are all very successful in their own rights and doing what they do. But it's definitely, it's definitely a unique practice. I think people stray away from it for many reasons, you know. So, what was the other part of that question?
I think you answered.
I went on a tangent there. I like tangents. Guillaume?
I don't know if I need that or...
Yes, you do.
Okay.
I've been yelled at.
Good afternoon. So my name is Guillaume Eicholz, and I work for Dominus Estate. And so just in few words to present, Dominus Estate is owned by Christian Moueix, and the Christian Moueix also owned Ulysses Vineyard. So Ulysses Vineyard is in Oakville, Dominus Estate is in Yountville, and Dominus Estates produce its wine from the Napanook Vineyard. And I'm going to talk more about the Napanook Vineyard. It's where the first vines were planted in Napa Valley in 1836 and by George Yount. And the vineyard has always been dry farmed. We never irrigated the vines. We will go in more details, I'm sure, but we irrigate only when the vines are the first 3 years, let's say maximum, and then we remove the drip system because we don't need it anymore. And I can explain later why. What I think.
That was good.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Michael. I'm farming Mariah Vineyards. We are a family-owned and operated vineyard in the Mendocino Ridge appellation. It's farming in the extremes. The vineyard sits at about 2,400 feet and first ridge line to the Pacific Ocean. We have average 84 inches of rain, and we farm our vineyard since 1999 completely without irrigation. So we have a really strong focus on a non-irrigated, non-chemical, and on a regenerative approach, and we work together with the Savory Institute.
Thank you. So I'm curious for all of you, what rootstock have you found to be most successful for dry farming? And if there's multiple ones, you know, or in different areas, but tell us about the rootstocks that you choose and why they're suitable for dry farming.
Yeah, so if you paid attention while we were up the hill, we utilized 10114 here at Hallberg Ranch, and we use Schwartzman down at our Pinot Hill Vineyard. We found that it's kind of controlled, it's moderate in terms of its overall growth level, in terms of quality and what we're looking for in terms of getting enough water out of the ground. We do have some 3309 here on the ranch, just in a specific site. It was just because that was the vines that were available, and we've recognized that those still work for dry farming, but those are the three rootstocks that we like to use.
The most successful rootstocks at Tallbless Creek are 1103 Paulson, which is the lion's share of the plantings, and we also have some St. George as well. That does really, really well.
So by order of the most planted and to the least planted, 1114, 3309, 110R, St. George, and a little bit of Riparia. And I would say I'm not an expert in rootstock, but what we are looking for is rootstock that are not too vigorous, because we don't want an overexpression of an overdevelopment of vegetation, particularly at the beginning of the season, so that the vine can stay balanced and do not waste the water and can go throughout the season without additional water.
At Mariah we have Hugo and Josephine loam, so we have a really well-drained soil that can hold a lot of water. We were successfully farming St. George, of course, 1103 Paulson and 3309. In my experience, up there with the best fruit quality results.
So this question is going to be for Jordan and Guillaume. So when establishing a dry farm vineyard, it's typical to irrigate. So when I establish a dry farm vineyard, we dig a basin around the vine, we water it twice the first year and once the second year, obviously dependent on the growing season, right? You have a drought year, you might water twice the second year, but that's pretty typical. So I know that Tablas Creek did it a little bit differently, right? Yeah. So we were digging basins and going around with a water cart, and we've already talked about the hillside, right? So you had a different way of doing that. So can you kind of touch on that a little?
Absolutely, yeah. So with the smaller plantings, there was a bucket brigade that would go out. It was like a 5/16 inch hole drilled about an inch off the bottom. We would time that water and see how long it would take to drain. With that clay, you wanted it to drain pretty slowly so the water didn't run off. But those were on these little minor plantings. When we first started putting in the rootstock and later grafted vines into the 40-acre planting, we found out very quickly that the bucket brigade was not going to work. They were starting on one side of the vineyard, and by the time they got to the other side of the vineyard at the end of the week, they'd have to turn around. Not to mention the winds that would come in, blow these buckets. I mean, you're picking 5-gallon buckets up all over the hill. So I got with a local irrigation company, and we basically took a system out of row crop farming. And we had a lay flat 2-inch hose that was being pumped or filled through a pump on some 5,000 gallon tanks we had at the top of the hill. We brought that main line kind of across the top of the hill, and then we were running 2-inch Netafim lay flat hose down the hill, down the slopes. Netafim you could dictate the spacing for the drip ports on this hose. So it was really cool. It was a really exciting system. The trickiest part was just managing the pressure. When you're going down a slope that steep and you have a 2-inch hose with water in it, you can imagine the head pressure was just intense. So they had this schematic where we had these pressure release valves, and we put all the pressure relief valves at their points that they estimated would be an issue. And the first time we turned the water on, it was just hilarious. It was like geysers all the way up and down the hill. So basically, we just started putting the pressure relief valves wherever we saw a geyser, and finally began to manage that. And it went from having a team of people up there irrigating all those vines or rootstocks to just one person going up and opening up those tanks, starting the pump. So it gave us full control, saved a whole bunch of vines and money.
The plantation of the vine is such it's so essential to succeed at the plantation, and then the first year and the second year are absolutely key in order to dry farm, because that's when, if the plantation is not done properly, then it's going to be complicated to catch up the messed up. So we pay really a specific attention to plant properly, to make sure that we trim the roots of the baby plants very short, 1 inch, and make sure that there's no roots that will so really be careful with that. And then we water with a hose for the first watering, just when we plant, and then we install the drip system, because we found that after several experiments that in fact the best way, the most efficient way to refill deeply the root reservoir is with the drip system. But what we do is we really favor big irrigations, like, even on 1 year old plants, we're going to do 8 gallons per plant, 10 gallons per plant. So a big irrigation, and we only need 2 free irrigation for the year. But also what's important is that we open holes. It's with a shovel or with the excavator, but when the plants are young, it's easy with a shovel to dig a hole, observe where the roots are, observe the soil moisture with your hands, very simple things, and evaluate if there's a need to irrigate. It's surprising to see that, I'm very surprised to see that it's been already 2 weeks that most of my neighbors, they already irrigated at least once, all their, even old vines, where the soil are just saturated. We had 40 inches of rain in Yountville. So it's just, I think, to have some curiosity and open holes and evaluate when it's necessary to refill the root reservoir. Because it's so important that the vines, they will grow, they will explore the ground only their first 8 to 10 years of their life. So during those first few years, they can grow. Like we know that 3-year-old vines you can find the root at 4 feet deep already. 1-year-old vines, they can, after 1 year, it depends on the soil, of course, but they can grow super deep very quickly. And so if you over-irrigate, then they're gonna just stay and wait for the farmer to bring them water. So we need to be attentive to make them independent. Yeah. You wanna?
No, it's all good.
No.
So my next question is, what are the greatest challenges when dry farming? So what have you experienced? What have been any setbacks? What are the challenges? And we'll start with Michael.
For us, the whole journey is a natural progression. We started as an irrigated vineyard, so we planted the vines with wide spacings, with the right rootstock, with the intention to dry farm once in the future, but had them on a drip until 1999, until the drip deteriorated, and we had to make a decision: do we replace the drip system or do we actually try to dry farm? And then we had a transition time with neutron probes, where we really looked, where we really wanted to have the outcomes to actually see if we turn off the water, because we weren't brave enough just to do that out of a gut feeling. And then we switched from cultivation to only cultivation underneath the vines, and from that to 100% ground cover. And during this journey we had different challenges, and the current challenge that we have is with our 100% ground cover and with 80 inches of rain and the flourishing ecosystem, is really to control the growth of the cover crop and all this biodiversity. So that's our biggest problem, is to maintain the ecosystem, actually.
Can I ask, how long were your vines in before you started the move to dry farming?
The first planting was 10 by 10 cross cultivated 90-80, and we switched 1999. The second phase was 1993 planted, and then the last planting was 2009. And we wind it off over a period of time. But for us, it was more, everything is about context. So on our side, with our planting, with our spacing, I think we could have dry farmed way earlier. But it was more the consciousness and to have the results to actually do that.
I think the main challenge is to, as growers, I think is to manage our fear. Our fear, because the using water is an easy, very easy action that we can use if we are afraid that the plants will not support a coming heat wave, or will not support a period of drought, or you see that your plant is not doing so well. Oh, I'm just going to add water. It's the first reflex. Even if you have, all of us, as we have gardens, or you have a plant in your house, you see that the plant is not doing so well. Well, the first thing we do is just add water. And so I think it's really this first challenge is to educate, and I put myself in that. We have to educate ourselves to know more the environment, to know more the soil, the plant, and understand what's going on, to avoid this too easy action to irrigate the plants.
If we're being site specific, I think Talbot Creek's biggest challenge would be finding an operator that has the guts to drive a tractor across those hillsides, to be honest. It's treacherous, and we're often either running a drag disc or a 3-point, whatever we have access to at that time in the season. So probably the most useful thing on the property is having a competent operator that's willing to cross cultivate on a 12-degree slope, hands down. Yeah, I mean, the rest comparatively to trellis irrigated stuff, I mean, I think it's a much more simple and efficient way to farm.
So you're crossing the slope, not going up and down the slope.
Yes, yeah. Our everything is planted on a diamond pattern with that in purpose. So that whole idea in that region is to have the ability to cross cultivate, because you can't go directly across the hill on a lot of those hillsides throughout the west side of Paso. You have to go at an angle. So picking will go straight up, but there are sections where you can only pick going up the hill. You have to do the death turn, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Don't call it that way.
I think that maybe the biggest challenge that we face here in Sebastopol is the idea of patience. We were talking about it as we were coming down the hill, the idea of the picturesque vineyard, the opportunity for it to all look as perfect as possible. With dry farming, you also find that if there's enough water, the vines are going to take off when they're going to take off. Once the ground finally warms up, then you'll start seeing that the vines will push harder. I think another major thing is kind of going towards Michael's idea of under vine management, since he's got 100% cover. Just the idea of taming those weeds that are underneath of it and crossing your fingers that maybe they won't get as tall. But I think that's maybe one of the biggest things that I can say as a challenge is just the idea of patience, because even when we started converting it, it was the opportunity to know the end goal and to take the leap of faith to say we're not going to turn on the water, and have that reflex of turning on the water when we start recognizing those vines may need something. But have faith in the soils that you have and let them showcase what they drive forward in the fruit.
So I think a common misconception with dry farming is that you sacrifice yield. You hear that all the time, that like, oh, I can't dry farm because I won't get the yield and it won't make sense economically. At my operation, I have found that to be untrue. So we get an average of 4 tons an acre, and we thin down to that. So I'm curious with all of you, I'm gonna ask 2 questions. First, if you feel comfortable answering, what is your average tonnage? And obviously we know that, in every area, what the Napa average and the Sonoma average and the Paso average is different, but what's your average tonnage? And then what's the age of your vineyard? So I think that is a benefit of dry farming, is the longevity of the vine. When you think of how expensive it is to farm, right? When it's establishing a vineyard, right? That's a huge expense. And when you think of all the infrastructure you have to put into place and the years without a crop, right? If you can extend the life of your vineyard by 10, 20 years, I think that's such a plus. So the average lifespan my average vineyard age at my place is maybe 30 years old. I'm getting a shake from my dad. Yes, 30. So, and 40. There's some that were planted right when I was born. So, and still going, right? Still being thinned down to that tonnage. So, so I'm asking the average tonnage and the age of your vineyard.
Yeah, we've got two sites. Holberg Ranch is 25 years old. Average tonnage is between 3 and 3.5 by the time we thin it down. We have some specific areas that are double caned that'll probably push closer to 8 tons until we thin it back down. We don't make wine off of that part. When it is the 8 tons, there's a lot of fruit on the ground, and when we ask winemakers to come out and take a look, we tell them to bring their rubber boots so they don't get their feet muddy. But we average between 3 and 3.5 tons to the acre here at Holberg Ranch, and between 1.5 tons and 2.5 tons at our Pinot Hill Vineyard on the south end of Sebastopol. And that's close to 17 years old.
Obviously varietal dependent, but I'd say probably anywhere to like the 2 to 3.5 range. There's some outliers in there, obviously. I think we've had years where Tannat was throwing like 5 or 6 tons per acre. But yeah, I'd be comfortable in saying like the 2 to 3.5 range for sure.
And the year? How old are all the vines?
Oh yeah, so the oldest would be about 25 years now, I'd say. There were some smaller plantings that were a bit older, a couple years older, but that vineyard, it looks like it's just hitting its stride now. I mean, there is no signs of weakness. It's not slowing down growth-wise at all. And then we have some stuff that's 8 years old, and then others that's 2.
We have to thin almost every block every year. So our average yield is about 4 tons. Between 3.5 to 5 tons. But we remove easy every year on most of the block. We remove 20 to 50% of the fruit. So it's absolutely, I don't understand this conception that this idea that with dry farming you have less fruit is completely wrong. In fact, on the contrary, the vines are so much more resistant, and we can talk about why they are more resistant and much more connected to the ground that I would be more worried by irrigating and having low yields and less resistant vines than dry farming. And the other question, so the vineyard at Napanuk, it's 15 years old, the average. We have vines, our oldest, we have 2 big blocks that are 35 years old, but we had to pull out a big part of the ranch in 2011, 2012 because of leaf roll virus. So we had to renew a big part of the ranch. But good things, we have 2 blocks that are 35 years old and they are really in very good shape. So.
We have one part that is 45 years old and the other one that is around 32 years old. Our average tonnage is about 2.5 to 3 tons. And longevity is absolutely in our focus. We are family farmed and operated vineyard, so we want to keep our wines as healthy and as flourishing as possible. I don't want to rip them out after 17 years. And we saw some eutypa issues now in the old sin blocks, so we started. So we changed our pruning. We started to switched to sap pruning and are really retraining the wines. And the first results are just mind-blowing, are absolutely cool. So I'm really optimistic that we can bring up the tonnage a bit more.
So we talked about the major challenges, but what are the major benefits? And Guillaume, you can talk about the what makes them resistant vines and things like that. But what are the benefits that you see in dry farming your vineyard?
I think one of our biggest benefits of dry farming is our carbon footprint. The idea that we do not have to turn on the pump. It's $1,000 every time I have to turn it on. So I'm saving money, I'm using less electricity, and I'm letting the terroir dictate what the vines are able to produce for the benefit.
Yeah, I mean, easily the amount of labor that goes into a dry farm vineyard comparatively to a trellis, tight space situation it's a huge benefit. You're running tractors for, for cultivating, and then you're done. Our crews, they're touching that many less vines in our system. Or in Talbot's system, or in the system that you typically see in Paso Robles. And then to Michael's point, the dominant training system in the Paso area would be this vertical cordon, and it is a version of sap flow pruning. I find that when you put a crew out there to prune, it's a really natural instinct for them to approach that vine. They're just pruning to the healthiest shoot. It's what they want to do. It's the way the vine wants to grow. You're not putting it in this tiny little box on a trellis and saying, you just stay right there and right next to that cordon wire, I want you to grow in this spot. That's not what a grapevine wants to do naturally. So in that process, you're allowing the grapevine to move its sap the way it naturally wants to, and therefore, you're way more resistant to eutypa and trunk diseases because you're allowing that vine to grow through a lot of those issues. Man, what are the other benefits? I mean, I think it's kind of endless. The yield thing, it's great. I think in a lot of the trellis portions of the vineyard, you might make 2 to 3 passes when you're going out there and dropping fruit. But in a dry farm planting, typically that's 1, and a lot of the time you can do that while you're shoot thinning. You have an idea of exactly what those vines are going to give you. So you're cutting those 2 passes into the 1 while you're shoot thinning. So I could go on, but I think that the less density, the sap flow, the natural, promoting this natural growth of a grapevine, less tractor work, all of the above as far as, Paso is concerned.
Well, now we are into interesting conversation because that's fascinating, and you're going to have to stop me. I'm going to try to be, I'm going to tell you just a few benefits. And so dry farming is part of a system that we put in place to connect the plant to the underground world. The soil is such it's not visible, but it's such an amazing world that we don't know. And the beauty of our job is that with wine and vine, we have a message. The wine is the message from this underground world. But in order to have an interesting message, we need to connect the plant as best as possible to this world. And irrigating would disconnect the plant because the vine will stay on the topsoil and waiting for the farmer to bring water and eventually food also through fertilizer. And so dry farming allows the plant to force itself to discover, to explore the ground and connect to this living world. It connects also via the mycorrhizae, and we can just also talk about mycorrhizae, which is fantastic, this little fungus that lives in symbiosis with the roots of the vines. They will not develop if in an irrigated land because there's no conditions. If it's too wet and the plant has access to too much water, the mycorrhizae will not develop because there's no need. But if there's a need because the plant is looking for water, then that's where the mycorrhizae will take into action and start to really connect with the roots of the plant and look for water and send it to the plant, and in exchange the vine will send some sugar that the mycorrhizae cannot produce. They don't do photosynthesis. So it's just and I'm going to say also something else. Why they are more resistant? Well, one, because they connect and explore the ground much better than an irrigated plant, but also because they produce a wood that is much more dense. They produce very small vessels and that are very tight, and so the wood is much more dense than an irrigated plant. And I've seen it from my eyes and my hands because we do plenty of different experiments in the vineyard. And irrigated vines have spongy roots, spongy wood that will be not resistant to a drought, will be not resistant to wood disease. They are, on the contrary, the dry farm plants have this dense wood that allow them to pump the water in deep volume of soil. And we can go on and on and on.
Same. For me, it's an expression of terroir. That's maybe because I'm from Europe, and I just believe that dry farming is the way to go. The second thing is climate resilience. So back to the terroir, when you have the tasting after in the tasting room and you look at the wall, there's a dry farmed wine at the wall. Check this root system out. That's just absolutely amazing how this wine goes down, and you can really see how it extracts all this beauty and brings it actually up in the grapes. The second thing is climate resilience. So we're farming in the extreme, especially here in California. Lot of rain, then a lot of heat waves, and when you ever walked through a dry farmed vineyard during these heat waves, then you know why you should actually do it.
So I do have more questions, but I want to give the audience an opportunity to ask anything you want about dry farming. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand. Yes.
It's about wine quality. Starting with Guillaume, my experience with Riparian is not really good on the rootstock Riparian, right?
Yeah,
you get the same, like a little lower quality on Riparian.
Yeah, I can only agree. Yeah,
Will you repeat the question?
I think Riparian is, because I mentioned that we have a little bit of Riparian, and it's true that for quality, it's really not our favorite. We've planted Riparian, I don't know, 12 years ago, and even because we had soil that had a tendency to have heavy clay and were saturated in water in the spring. But yeah, no, I don't really recommend it. Yeah.
And between 110R to 1103P, do you see any differences in berry size and quality?
I don't know 1103P, so yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
Anybody else? Yes.
I'm told that white grapes don't like to be water stressed.
That white
Irrigation specialist.
That white grapes?
White grapes.
So that white grapes
Yes.
don't like to be water stressed.
And so can you weigh in on that?
Well, I would just say that I think when you're dry farming, you're not necessarily stressing, with water. I don't see that, right, in our vineyards, but does anyone else want to answer that with white grapes? And Dominus doesn't.
No, but I can tell you about my experience in Burgundy, but
Perfect.
I think exactly like you said, what is water stress? And then it's just because I've talked to some growers where they considered water stress to have yellow leaves in September, some yellow leaves. And yeah, that's for us. It will be. I hope we're gonna have some yellow leaves in September. It's when the plants now needs to go really in the focus on the reproductive cycle and not the production cycle. So I would say, yeah, what is water stress? And then, but to talk about Burgundy, it's not when there's a lot of rain during the summer that you produce the best vintages, and the best vintages are produced from dry summer, and the plants have lot of yellow leaves. Yeah.
To his Guillaume's point, I think as we see with humans' interaction with nature, it's often us that is the problem, right? We're creating the stress.
And after this, we have our wine tasting, and I believe there are 3 white wines, dry farmed white wines to taste. So, yes, Brad?
It seems like you guys are all pretty much farming in areas that are pretty high precipitation. Maybe Thomas would be the exception. Where we average 21 inches, and then I'm working on establishing a vineyard where we average 13 inches of rain a year. What are your recommendations? Maybe not for dry farming, but maybe for, if we can cut down to one irrigation a year or something like that. What are your recommendations for establishing a vineyard like that?
So I'm real quick just going to say that we have seen that we need about 16 inches of rain to successfully dry farm a vineyard in Napa, where we are with the spacing, with the rootstock, with everything that we have set up. So I think that's a magic number for us. I think there's, there's a man, Steve Gleisman, who has Condor's Hope down in the Cuyamas Valley, and he's dry farming on 10 inches of rain, if that. Like, that's a good year for him. So it's definitely possible, but I would think that, when you get to those low precipitation amounts, I think you would have to think about spacing, right? A larger spaced vineyard, and to allow for the vine to access more of the soil moisture would be my recommendation. And we'll pass it down.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for you on it, but in terms of spacing, that's something that I wanted to kind of touch on. Like, we're meter by 2 meters, so we're very tight in terms of our spacing here, but it is because we do get more than enough rain, and we do force those vines to look for it down deep instead of going sideways.
I'd say your first step is really to look at your soil type and get a really good grasp at what sort of water holding capacity you have there. What can you store on a wet winter, on your good winters, and even more importantly, what can you store on those dry winters? From there, it's like timing of your tractor work, right? So if you're going to be turning that ground, you got to be really ready to jump if you've had a dry season, to create that dust mulch layer. Steve Gleisman, I guess he had a lot of forethought in the sense what he was doing and where he was doing it was very unrealistic. So he actually went in and did some submerged irrigation lines. On the really dry years, he had this safety net to go in and be able to turn water on. They're deep enough to where he's not going to affect it. We use Toblis uses a yeoman's plow as well. So if you're farming on a slope, I think it's a really useful tool to kind of create a channel you cross cultivate the hillside. So then you're allowing to, stop water and slow water down, and also get some deep penetration and percolation of that rainfall. But I think first and foremost, you just got to understand what sort of ground you're working with. If you're on sandy soil and flat ground and you're getting 12, 13 inches a year, it might not be a good choice.
Yeah, I agree with that. In Yountville and Oakville, we've done 2 beautiful vintages, 2021 and 2008, with less of 10 inches of rain during the rain season. What happened, it was very interesting. The Cabernet Sauvignon has a great capacity to reduce its foliage. The vine produces smaller shoots. Very early in the season, they adapted and reduced the growth, and then the other thought is the soil characteristic, and then it's patience, and it took the best vineyards in the world, the monks in Burgundy took centuries to establish and where to plant vineyards. So I think it's maybe in our new society now we want to do everything very fast. I think with vines it takes more than a life to know where to plant. Yeah. No.
And I was just going to really quick say, Chris, that part of this project is that we are working with Land IQ on creating a map of the entire state of California with dry farm suitability. So the idea would be that you'd be able to look at your area and see dry farm vineyards with similar conditions. And so you would be able to click on my vineyard and see what spacing I have, what rootstock I have, all of that information to help you make an educated, assumption of what you could do. So I hope that would be able to, work for you, so you could see like, what's someone who has the similar conditions, with soil and growing degree days and average rainfall and things like that, and how are they successfully dry farming their vineyard. So that will be coming out in the next, 6 months or so, and we'll be able to send that out to all of you. Any other questions? Yes.
Have any of you experimented with a roller gripper? It's used a lot in row crops and no-till environments, just creating a lot of biomass with the cover crop and then laying it down as a mulch layer.
So a roller crimper. Yeah. So has anybody experienced with a roller crimper? Yeah. I have, and we tried once and it didn't go well. Our vines, it probably just wasn't the right situation, right? It was a dry year, not the right year to experiment, and we saw the vines kind of shutting down. So in our experience, it did not work, but.
I think everyone in the grape game is still learning a lot about the roller crimper. I think like at Taublus, for instance, the issue is the amount of clay in the soil. So we really have found that disking is kind of crucial. Those soils swell a lot in the wintertime, and then as things dry out, we start hitting 95 to 100 degrees. If you're not disturbing that ground, it's binding together and pulling apart. We'll see this in the trellis parts of the vineyard where we have 8% organic matter. This is the makeup of that soil. It's fascinating, and I think, with roller crimping, you have to be intentional with like what you're crimping, right? So just buying the straight up organic soil max out of LA Hearn might not be the best decision, right? You want to have something that you can fold that stalk over and it's actually going to crimp, as opposed to like a pea species that will get crimped and just stand right back up, right? So I think there's a lot of validity behind the practice, but I think it'd be very interesting, like say up at Mariah, where your issue is water, right? So by leaving root systems intact and crimping that over, they actually might help draw some of that water up that your vines have too much of. I think again, it's just like a really site-specific type of implement and operation.
Yeah, we have the objective of the crimper is to create a mulch of dry grass, and we've been working on that. It's been 3 years now. We also conduct a study with UC Davis where we have several blocks where we alternate some rows, where disked rows and rows that where we keep the ground cover. We don't use so much the crimper because it's not. I think we need to gain experience with the crimper, but we are able to do the mulch with mowers, and it's very interesting. It's I think we are little by little discovering a really new farming technique. Instead of cultivating the soil in a dry summer climate where the topsoil becomes extremely hot during the summer and reflect the heat to the fruit, we are isolating the soil with this mat of dry grass And the first results are very encouraging. What we see, and what I can tell you so far, the study, we were able to see that the vines are less stressed with the ground cover because they produce a little bit less vegetation. The fruit quality is very encouraging. Last year we had better, let me define. We had fruit with higher phenolic compounds where we leave the ground cover. So yeah, it might be a solution for the changing weather in California, becoming more and more dry and hot. It might be a solution, but the study needs to continue.
100% ground cover is, in my opinion, the way to go. We do test with crimping up. We have similar experiences like you have, that you have to go in the right moment, otherwise stuff bounces back up. So it's a science, and we're still learning. So my whole journey up there is a story of success and failure, you know, and trying. But on our side, I'm coming back to context, right? On our side, with our rainfall, 100% ground cover is, you know, we have so much rainfall that we have to sequester, that we have to let suck in, that we don't have erosion, that we have to go with 100% ground cover. And rodent pressure is another thing that is in our thing with these crimping trials. So we have friends down in Paso Robles that had quite rodent pressure the last year. So we have always an eye on that, and are really cautious how far that we push with crimping and no crimping.
Any more questions? Chris.
Can I actually just speak to the lower rainfall question?
Sure.
I just wanted to speak to the lower rainfall question. My name is Chris Veal. I'm contracting with the Community Alliance of Family Farmers and helping with the Central Coast component of this project. And we get less rainfall down there. We have a tour coming up on May 21st. It's at 3 different places. And it's interesting because I actually come from an irrigation background. So coming and looking at dry farming systems was very different for me. And one of the things that I learned, yes, we have Mr. Gleesman in Guillaume, 12 by 12, 8, 10, 12, 14 inches of rain on a good year, very wide spacings, sandy soil, but very deep soil, like very deep soil. So even though he has a sandy soil, he has a pretty, large water holding capacity because of the depth of the soil. One of the things that I've learned is there's just a huge variety of what people are doing down there. We might have like the 12 by 12 situation sprawled, sort of what we expect to see. I've got another guy that did 9 by 4.5, fully trellised. It does get a little more rain than Guillaume, but not 40, 50 inches, like kind of the fair amount of rain on a normal year. And he did it at 9 by 4.5. He knows how to farm different types of systems, and he did that one because he kind of knew how to farm it, and he didn't know if it was going to work, right? So he sort of hedged his bet, like if he didn't quite have enough water, he could take out the 4.5 and be on a 9 by 9 and probably be better. Another guy who's on a variety of different spacing, but I remember walking out to his vineyard and there was like all this cover. And I thought, wow, I haven't seen this before. But he's got a ton of vigor. His floor management is completely different than other systems. And again, it's what I'm kind of coming to the conclusion is that it's a game of Tetris. It's not just one thing or another. Even the 9 by 4.5 guy says, I have a ton of vigor, even in this fairly tight system for us, and no added irrigation. So the spacing, but that's also the depth, right? And your soil type. They are all playing factors in terms of like what your available water holding capacity. And then you look at varieties, you look at aspect, you look at root stocks. That's all going to be influencing, what kind of canopy you have, so there's not a one size fits all. I mean, I'm hearing over and over and over that it's like, in my situation, this is what I can do. And I just trust everyone to kind of take a look how deep your soils are, talk to people that you trust, know your site. But like growers do all of that anyway, right?
Yeah.
Right? Those are all things that in ag that we take care of. So I just wanted to throw that in there and join us on the tour on the 21st.
Thanks, Chris. Jordan, you mentioned dust mulch, and I don't know if everybody knows what that means. Do you want to elaborate on what a dust mulch is?
Sure. In I guess in Toblus's case, due to that clay content and the shrinking and the swelling of the soil, to avoid cracking, because some of these cracks can be really deep. I mean, you're talking 1 to 2 to 3 feet even, and that's moisture during the warm parts of the year. That's evaporation loss. So there is a term that dry farmers use called dust mulch layer, and what you're doing is when you feel like the winter rains have ceased and it's dry enough to get back out into the field, you go up and you're basically breaking up the top couple inches of soil and reducing its ability to bind together and to separate, and essentially trapping in all those winter rains, trapping in that moisture that you collected all winter. It's a funny term, dust mulch, but I think it works in a lot of cases. Some people do it for the right reasons, some do it for the wrong. I think in dry farming, there's a lot of intention behind it, and it definitely serves its purpose.
Is that always with a disc, or could it be with a spader?
The spader is, one of the greatest creations in farming, I think. I mean, you had never seen, we had the Perrin family was out with, a legendary farmer last summer, and they had never seen a spader run. And it was in a low-lying block, 5 foot tall cover crop, and it was driving one pass, taking that 5 foot tall cover crop and driving it underground and leaving it just completely permed. So yes, that will create an amazing dust mulch layer. The drag disc does a really, really good job at doing that because it contours the hill. You're not attached to the 3-point, so you're really getting this great contact with the ground. Yeah. So, but yes, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Are there other tools that you guys use to create that layer?
No, yeah, I think a disc and a dust mulcher, a disc and a cultivator, right? Those are great. So kind of going off of that, what are the most important implements? Like the top two? I think Riggs, you already told me today, but you can tell everybody what's your favorite implement for dry farming?
My favorite implement is a spader. I called it. That thing is just the most amazing thing about allowing enough air to push the water down, to get it down to those root systems, even in the highest of clay contents. It just works and you only have to make it pass once. It's not a multiple pass scenario. It's a one and done for us.
Riggs took mine, so I'm gonna go with the drag disc. I think quite often you got to find a crafty old farmer / welder that can build one out for you. For in Passo's scenario, or a Toblus steep hillside, so that 3-point just does not feel right when you watch your operator going across the hill. And then the other would be the yeoman's plow. I think that thing has so many benefits in a dry farming system, but you can also use it for a lot of your trellis stuff. It's a form of vertical tillage. You know, imagine 3 shanks in a buried into the ground that are designed to slice through the soil rather than lifting or disturbing. So you achieve the ability to capture water as it's moving down a hill, reduce erosion, you're root pruning at the same time. So yeah, that one there, I think you can use it on a lot of parts of your farm if you're doing both.
I think it's not going to be very fancy tools. I think, like I said at the beginning, it's about to dry farm properly is about educating yourself. So I would say a shovel, my hands, my eyes, a pruning shear, just to make the observation, educate yourself, and then try to take the good decisions.
If you're dry farming with ground cover, by far an aerator. We have an aerator that after harvest, we drag through the whole property that pokes holes all over the place, and the water infiltration and the aeration is just mind-blowing. So by far the aerator.
Again, site-specific, right?
It's very much site-specific. Is there any other questions? Yes.
Measuring like soil aggregation, have you seen any soil aggregation forming or getting deeper than your disking?
So what we see is, what we start to see is really beautiful, is that the roots of the cover crop, they start to create this, instead of having a compact layer of soil, we have something that's very crumble and with much more active matter, organic matter. So a richer soil. It's the beginning of the beginning, but it looks very promising, very interesting. Yeah.
I'll comment on that. So through the regenerative organic certification process, we are doing a lot of the in-depth soil sampling on the soil, on both plantings, or dry farmed, heavily disked, heavily tilled, all the way across the board to pieces of the property that have been no-till for 6 years at that point. There is no question that when you're using heavy tillage, the differences between organic matter, active carbon, bulk density, all of those parameters that people are really focused on right now in the top 12 inches of soil were significantly less, like to amounts that, I think we're under 1% organic matter in our dry farm plantings versus 6 to 8% in our trellis irrigated. That said, no one's really looking, and it's a conversation that we have online quite a bit with Frank. I mean, there's no one's really looking at what's going on 5 feet underground, right? So what is the effect there? You know, does that horizon of life that we destroy year after year, does that start moving down into the ground, or in some ways is it preserving it, you know? So I think, yeah, your soil, if that's like your focus, you're managing your soil health, which can play a really vital role, I think, in viticulture. But in a dry farm system, if you are disking and you do have wide spacing, how much does it affect those vines is a question, right? If you're lucky enough to have 80 inches of rain or 40 inches of rain that you can rely on every year, I mean, I think it's an awesome opportunity with the agrology. You're going to start being able to watch that microbiology and watch how it thrives or doesn't in those plantings. So, yeah, it's a great question.
Any other questions?
I have
Yes.
a question for Riggs. You mentioned rodent control, and I'm really curious if you see less damage to your vines with dry farming because your rodents aren't as active.
On the new plantings, there's always going to be a rodent pressure. No matter how many coyotes, foxes, possums, raccoons, hawks, eagles, you name it, we've got it. Those new plantings are always going to be attacked. With the dry farming, those 25-year-old vines, you don't see the damage. You see it on some of the beginning suckers and the rootstocks that decide to show up, but it's not affecting the actual vine itself, which is what we've recognized. And since we alternate the rows, we do see an increase in terms of rodent passages, depending on where we pull those specific discs and how we're maintaining it. Hopefully that answers the question.
And we never have any gopher issues. But we do cultivate all of our rows, right? And it's moving day, right? They don't have time to set up, shop in our vineyards, right? They are going into my garden though, so that's the big problem. My husband worked for a large vineyard management company over in Napa with finance, and he was blown away by the amount of money that this company spent just on gophers. They had 2 full-time employees just thinking about gophers and way to kill gophers and how to trap gophers, and they had trucks for, and it adds up, right? So that's a benefit of dry farming for sure. Are there any other questions? We have our wine tasting after this, so I invite you all to stay, and we have 5 wineries from 4 different regions, so Sonoma, Mendocino, Napa, and Paso. And you'll be able to talk with the viticulturalist or winemaker, whoever's pouring, and ask more questions, get some one-on-one time with them, and yeah, just come up to any of us and please just anything you want to know about dry farming, we're here to answer.